Well, despite the lights, this is welcome once again, Adrian Levy. We're going to talk today about. Thank you. We talked about what we are going to discuss today a little bit, very briefly yesterday, and the idea of the siege, is something that really took hold of us during the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai. It's something that we hadn't really experienced before this, which is a wonder considering how lax our security was. But the fact that a handful of people with guns and bombs could hold an entire city almost to ransom for 3 whole days, was that what attracted you to the story? What was it that attracted you to the story? And Adrian has been an Asia veteran. He's been reporting from various parts of Asia for a very long time now, for both print and TV, and he's been a documentary filmmaker. So what was it about this story that attracted you?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming on this chilly evening. It's a fantastic crowd, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and listen about the book. There's so many reasons, to do it. I mean, there was a cascade of reasons, and they all began for me as we were flying through Mumbai with my missing by 2 days the city. It immediately became obvious to both of us, to myself and Kathy, who co-writes with me, my partner, that they were extraordinary events. It's not just another attack. It's not just move on and go to the next terrorist attack. It was something extraordinary, and those strands, if you separate them out, they're very simple. The first thing that was clear is that but low finance attack. It's roughly $40,000 to hold the world's 4th largest city to ransom, and that. Was set loose on Mumbai and remotely controlled by mobile phone from a control room back in Karachi. And that act of ventriloquism was significant for 2 reasons. One, everything that was said between the parties was taped by Western and Indian intelligence agencies, and actually by the tapes reveals something we normally never know, and that's what happens inside the black box. I mean, when there is a Fidayeen attack, a suicide attack of this kind, you never know what's going on inside the middle of the attack. You can never understand the relationship between the people who will sacrifice their lives and those who will ask them to sacrifice their lives. And this is something really remarkable. When you listen to the voices, you listen to the hours of tape, and then you translate them, you listen to the words, you seek meaning in them, what you understand is the relationship between the Lashkar commanders and the boys they sent in. And some of that, the psychology of it, was absolutely extraordinary.
Stunning. And as you were saying, he was telling me earlier about how we've read a few transcripts in our media, and we've been exposed to, but he's actually had access to the parts that we weren't told about, that we weren't shown. So he and Kathy actually reached places where no media could have gone, which includes inside the LET, inside the Lashkar-e-Taiba. If you've read The Siege, I'm assuming a lot of you have. It's unputdownable, to borrow a phrase from one of our sponsors. But it's completely, it's alarming, the extent to which we don't know. The things that we actually don't know are alarming. Why do you think that is? We are the ones who will get affected in case of another attack. We, the people on the ground, and yet we know so little about what actually happened during the attack.
The feeling I got really strongly from everyone we interviewed in the hundreds of different interviews that we sort of tessellated together to build the picture, even when we began, for example.
It's okay.
There's no agreed timeline. I mean, when we came to this, there's the timeline of the police, there's the timeline of the intelligence services, there's the timeline provided by the hotel, there's the timeline provided by the Black Cats, the National Security Guard. I mean, actually, we started with 10 timelines. And some of them put events at remarkably different places. It's to do with trying to root everything in the technical fact. and trying to use that then as the ruler by which you measure everything else that happens. So we decided to come at it, in essence, trying to create some kind of empirical facts, set around that, people who participated with the families of victims and survivors, and create our own inquiry. And what prompted that was the absence of any state commission. You know, Pradhan was called, the Pradhan inquiry, you may have seen the report, and we felt quite sort of amazed by the state inquiry. 64 pages. I remember being given a draft copy in 2009. Two men called to inquire into this benchmark event, and they produced a 64-page account. And yet, if you think of the significance of 26/11, and you compare the response after 9/11, or 7/7 in London, you know, the 9/11 Commission ran to 556 pages, and the 7/7 Commission generated thousands, hundreds of thousands in the end, actually, pages that were digitized in the National Archive. The feeling within government was move on, do not analyze, no lessons learned. I get the feeling, no lessons learned. And in essence, Pradhan, which couldn't review intelligence, which was not allowed to interview military NSG, struggled to gain any kind of truth from the police, and of course couldn't cross into Pakistan, where Kathy and I have worked for many years. So we could kind of act as the anti-Pradhan. That's what we kind of saw ourselves as, trying to tease out different stories and put together a timeline and work out from that what did happen, because in the end the city saved itself. And that's what this book is about.
That's what it did, yes. How many enemies have you made exactly in India and Pakistan?
I've got no enemies.
But prior to this discussion.
I've got only friends.
All right. That is probably what allows you access to all these places. But tell me something. You know, today, we're, what, 5 years and a little more after the attack. The same 10 people could walk into Mumbai again and do the same thing all over again, couldn't they?
Well, I don't want to do any crystal ball gazing, you know, or wish such a thing to happen. But I mean, you can draw a straight line from Mumbai to the Westgate siege in Nairobi, for example. If you look at that siege, what's really interesting is it was devised in the same camps where Mumbai was masterminded.
Yeah, I was going to come to that. This insight into the workings of the Lashkar and how sophisticated they have gotten with time, not necessarily more expensive, but the fact that they're now concentrating on psychological training and...
Well, they're lending their skills, you know,
right.
they use the lessons of Al-Qaeda to become facilitators as well as operators. And sometimes they hire out their services, as they did with Westgate. They help design, shape, train some of the key operatives who were behind Westgate. And they definitely, the lessons that they learn help to inform Westgate. And one thing that I found remarkable is that when you're with Lashkar, what you see is the internal discipline of the organization. I don't know if anyone's watched the videos in any of their training sessions. They're available on YouTube. But what you can see when you're actually inside their base in Muridka or in Muzaffarabad, where they do military training, is they don't just require you to sign up to Lashkar-e-Taiba. They require you to submit to the philosophy and the internal discipline of the organization. So they are very cohesive. They have an idea, and that idea is very strongly drummed into the cadre of Lashkar-e-Taiba. And they had been going global, if you like, for some time. In fact, we now know that from 2002, 2003, around just prior and then after the invasion of Iraq, a whole section of Lashkar broke away from the traditional state-backed section that was interested in fomenting war in Kashmir and was allied to the ISI, and instead they moved towards Al-Qaeda. And this section wanted to do what Al-Qaeda had done. It wanted to grab more headlines, be more Islamist, attack broader targets, which were Western and Jewish and European, broadly speaking, and not simply stir the pot in India. And so, in fact, what was happening prior to the attacks was the building up of a picture of Lashkar as a global operator, much more akin to Al-Qaeda. And they were present in London, raising funds and placing sleepers. They were in Germany, attracting converts, and they were in France. And the first target they planned to hit was a Australian nuclear installation using the German converts and British cash. And a huge dossier was put together. It's really detailed and provides a great insight into how Lashkar raises funds and what the philosophy of the organisation is. And the French put it together. They got details from using British detectives at Scotland Yard, and it was taken to the Americans in 2000 and I think around 2006. Can't remember the exact date now. And the dossier was rejected, interestingly, even though America had proscribed Lashkar-e-Taiba. And the reason it was rejected is that Lashkar is the child of the Pakistan military and was seen as far too complex a subject to tackle or confront at a time when America needed Pakistan to be its security bulwark in Asia. And so the dossier sat idle. That message wasn't heeded. And yet at the time, of course, Lashkar was looking at another global operation, which was attacking Mumbai.
You know, that and the depth to which you have gone on all of those 10 boys, as you put them, reading their stories and how they were gradually co-opted and then turned into these robots almost. And up until their deaths, and they're on the phone as they're dying. You know, that was the extent of the control that was exercised on them. There's this, once again, for those of you who read it, I think you'll find a great deal of sadness. There's a huge sense of sadness at how these boys were used. And there appears to be something of the Nazis about the way that the Lashkar functions. You know, you think back to Hitler and the SS and, you know, that kind of the Hitler Youth. Do you find parallels? And, you know, with your background, because of your Jewish background, would you find parallels there?
The first things first, I think that Lashkar, you know, nothing it does by accident. It's a sophisticated lesson-learning organisation. And I've said on other occasions that one of the things that you find most interesting is the way in which Lashkar evolves when it faces crises. It carries out an operation, it films it, it reviews the footage, and then it makes amends. It trains itself in different ways. It finds different ways to accomplish things that it didn't previously. So
which a government can never do.
Well, which the government chooses not to do. There's a big difference here. So in that sense, you know, Lashkar avoids it's not bureaucratically top-heavy. It places its emphasis on activism and achieving results based on lessons learned. The exact opposite of the way the government works in essence. But there's another thing here. One of those facilities is a psychological facility. It has a lessons learned cell in its camp in Muzaffarabad, and it also has a psychological cell. And what they look at is how the relationship between the military handlers and the soldiers, and that relationship is critical to the way they operate. And what they do is strip down the characters and the emotions of the foot soldiers in a relationship which is, we called it infantilizing. I mean, they literally make them kids. And when you listen to the tapes, what you hear, if any of you have got children, is the sound of yourself chastising your kids when they're naughty. I mean, it's slightly, of course, more macabre than that. But at key moments, the soldiers are insolent, tardy, lazy. And the parents on the other side in Karachi are encouraging, firm, goading, and won't put up with insolence. And so when they want to lie down on the bed, there's an extraordinary, surreal scene in the Taj Hotel where 4 of the gunmen get together on the 6th floor. And you can hear on the tape, if you play it with headphones on, them rustling around, the fridge door opening, them reaching inside, the plink as they open a can of Coke or some kind of fizzy drink, carbonated drink from the fridge, them lying down, rustling on the duvet, the 4 guys together, the sound of the hostages they had in the room moaning on the floor, them chomping chocolate bars that they pulled from the fridge, and then the voice of the controller in Karachi saying to them, "Get off the beds, what are you doing? Build the fire, are you sleeping?" And it's that parental voice, the attenuation, the infantilizing, and that demonstrates the sophistication of the operation.
How long did it take you? You know, considering these hours of tape that you went through, even this brief description, I suspect, was very, very disturbing for a lot of us. Considering the hours of such tape that you went through, such conversations, how difficult was it to come out of the whole thing? And how deeply did you get involved emotionally, or how much of yourself did you invest in this whole process?
I think all of these kind of projects are the same, and you get locked in completely. So, you know, one good thing actually is having children, because they force you out of the maze once you're inside, I mean, you're inside, you know, I was in 2008 unmovingly for many years, you know, until I reached the school gates. And then there'd be a reason not to be in 2008. You have to, by necessity, become trapped in that subject, in the room, in the hotel, in the crisis, to try and feed your way around it. And what we do is we recreate a lot of the settings inside the place that we write, and we do it by creating walls of photographs which we hang facts and quotes to. And so all of the walls inside the place where we write becomes a visualization of a lot of the things that we've seen and heard, and then we'll reference them when we're in scenes. But there'll be huge periods where that's all we're thinking in the writing process. That's all we're doing, you know, until someone actually says to me, you know, are you ever going to make dinner? Or, you know, can I watch some TV? Or I've got swimming tomorrow. You know, it's those humanizing things that pull you out. But, you know, every interview is a transaction. And those transactions you have to be very careful with. And they are not simply something that happens and then you move on. You know, most of the people in that book still send emails every week, every 2 weeks. And that would be true from the first book we wrote in '98 through Deception in 2004, through The Meadow. I mean, and the books are themselves the product of years and years of friendships and relationships that come to something. Yes. You know, we meet as kids, they grow up, we grow up, and over 20 years, suddenly, you're in the right place at the right time to write a book.
We were also talking yesterday about the dangers of association. You know, you write a book like this, it stirs up a lot of controversy, it stirs up a lot of people, a lot of inquiries are instituted, and the people around you, those who helped maybe in the writing of the book, those who were in the book, unnamed in the book, do get affected, don't they? That's one fallout of what you do.
You contaminate people. There's a, you know, we always think of that word contamination. You know, you blunder into situations if you don't think too clearly. And while you may be able to find a way to exit, what you do is incriminate the people who've talked to you, or expose them, or undermine them. And that's one of the biggest things that you have to think about. And you don't do when you begin this job. You just blunder around thinking, oh, you know, I'll do a big hike into northern Burma, and it will take me 5 days to reach Shan territory. You know, but the point is everyone could see you in the woods as the only Falang, the only white person operating in Shan area, which means everyone you touch and speak to will be arrested by military intelligence when you leave. And so much more further down the line, you have to consider actually how you can operate safely for yourself, plan so that you'll come out alive, you won't be kidnapped, abducted, shot, or starved to death, or be eaten by an animal. And then not only that, but you also won't affect everyone else and the lives of everyone else. And yes. Some terrible sport happens often in the press where people try and guess who's given what pieces of information. And particularly I remember when we did our Kashmir book, and a section of IB wanted to come forward with certain truths, which was really interesting. And they had given information quite willingly. And in fact, I told a story a while ago about how I was in Srinagar in winter, and I got a phone call very late, and a guy said to me, I'm so-and-so. He introduced himself to me, and I said, I don't know you, I'm sorry. And he said, I need to meet you now. And I said, no, it's late, I'm not leaving anywhere at this time. And he said, no, it's really important, you should come. So I said, okay, and all I could think of was the brightest place in Srinagar, which had its own generator, was Coffee Day. So I said, meet me in the cafe, we'll meet there, it's got bright lights. So we went to the cafe, and he was a guy who had been assigned as part of IB to doing duties involving foreigners and press who were working inside the valley. But he'd been around since 1995, and the book was about the kidnappings. And he was cross that I hadn't called. You know, he had all of these feelings that had been welling up and wanted the opportunity to voice them, to articulate them. And subsequently, you know, I had many different kinds of meetings with him and people he introduced me to. And that unburdening process is quite confessional. And the agreement is that you don't then undermine them, and yet other people will be picking away, trying to play this guessing game.
Trying to find, you know.
Yeah, it's people's lives that are at risk.
It's like a treasure hunt for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's not for us.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
And you know, it's not at all.
Couldn't be. I mean, you know, that would be. Do you think, as a foreigner, you do gain access to certain areas, certain situations that locals or natives may not?
I don't know. I think about this a lot. I think there's one advantage of being an outsider. The advantage of being an outsider is that you are seen as not part of the melee. That may be happening more locally. So, for example, people feel in Kashmir that maybe you could listen to something and won't necessarily have a paid-up position when you're listening to it, even if that would be, let's say, someone from Harkat Mujahideen, or it would be someone from IB. So I think there may be a perceived neutrality, which leads to confessional relationships on both sides. And I've been, in the hills above Baramulla. I've been in Tral, where meetings have been arranged through friends, where you'll find yourself. In fact, some of these stories, I'm saying me, actually. Kathy's told me they're actually about herself. But I remember when she told me when she found herself in an
abaya, but she always wears an abaya wherever she goes.
She was, but she was in the end sitting under a whole series of Chinese blankets with a brigade of Harkul Mujahideen, and she came back with this fantastic story, which I was very jealous about. But a huge insight in 3 evenings spent under lockdown in this village. And I actually thought, as a result of that neutrality had got her in, and actually in a funny way had got her out, although there had been 10 years of contact making that actually led to her decision that it was safe to have the meeting. And it was safe to report the meeting. So there are some win-wins. The bad side is that we miss a lot of the shorthand. So, there's sometimes a lot of unpicking. I tape everything, Kathy tapes everything. You have to go over everything 100 times.
For the nuances, nuances, and the layers. I hate to bring this up, but the image of Daniel Pearl is so strong in our memories. It will probably remain, riveted in our memories for all those.